Aster Vale Interplanetary Academy sat under a valley dome on a frozen moon. Training Habitat 1 was built to feel like a movie set, with fake ice, fake fog, and staff ready to stop anything real. Tonight, the air was dropping for real, and the dome was not forgiving. Two groups were already moving to own the outcome. Aegis Marshal Unit was campus security with nets, scanners, and door codes. Grey Talons was a cadet clique that loved blame and loved footage even more. Orion Wren had two goals he could say out loud. Get his team breathing clean air, and get himself to the med bay before Aegis locked the corridor. He was halfway over the crevasse pit when the cold fan surged and the overhead lights flickered. A fog vent hissed and dumped white vapor across the deck like a fire extinguisher. Orion raised his hand and steadied their pace. The mask seal on his face tightened as pressure dipped. Up now. No talking. Save air, Orion said. Juno Mallory, an adult trainee in a blue rescue suit, hauled herself up the rope ladder with stiff hands. Bryn Cato climbed beside her, boots scraping the textured ice. Orion heard the change in their breathing before he saw it. He slapped the wall panel for the emergency gate. It should have popped open like a boarding bridge to the main hall. The panel flashed a flat lockout. Not local, Orion muttered. The deck shuddered again, and the platform under his left foot tilted just enough to steal balance. Orion slammed shoulder first into the rim, and his head snapped back. Pain fired down his neck, sharp and electric. His right hand opened and would not close. His tongue felt thick, and the air tasted like metal through the mask. Orion forced sound through his throat. Collar. Now, Orion said. Juno snapped the rigid collar from the rescue kit around his throat. The click sounded too loud in his skull. Bryn grabbed Orion's harness and kept him upright. Orion blinked at a world that would not hold still. A calm voice rolled over the ceiling speakers, like a gate announcement that knew it held power. It sounded too clean for a training night. Training Habitat 1 is under anomaly safety containment. Remain in place for Aegis Marshal assessment. Juno stared up, eyes wide behind her mask. Her voice came out. Finn, Aegis is coming. Orion swallowed and felt the collar press against tender skin. The air alarm chirped again, bright and cruel. He knew waiting would turn him into a sealed problem. If he waited, Aegis would arrive with nets and a reader, and Orion would be stuck with a damaged neck and thinning air. He made the only decision that mattered. He chose motion before paperwork. Service crawl, left wall, Orion said. We move before they lock the spine. Bryn lunged into the fog and found the hatch seen by touch. He kicked once and metal rang. Orion flinched as his vision sparked. The hatch gave with a dull pop and spilled slightly warmer air. They dragged Orion into the dark crawl space as a heavy door slammed somewhere outside. It sounded like the academy turning its hallways into a trap. Orion needed air and a stable neck. He needed both before Aegis pinned him as a liability. Juno and Bryn hauled him through the crawl and into the academy med bay. It looked like an emergency room built for trainees who learned the hard way. A nurse drone scanned Orion's face, then waved them straight to Bay 3. The drone moved like it had seen panic too many times. Dr. Morel Quaid was already there with sleeves up and eyes on the monitor. She ran the neural lab, and she moved like she had done this in worse places than a campus clinic. One look at Orion's slurred speech and limp right hand, and she reached for gloves. Her voice stayed flat and fast. High neck trauma, Quaid said. Hold him still. Juno started to explain the lockout and the containment call. Quaid cut her off with a sharp hand motion. Later, Quaid said. Now. Quaid lifted a sealed kit the size of a phone case. She held it where Orion could see it. Neural catalyst, Quaid said. It is a bridge when the nerve line is failing. It matters because it keeps your brain and hands talking. We do it now because the next few minutes decide what you keep. Orion could not form a clean sentence, but he nodded. A tech cleaned the skin at the base of Orion's neck and pressed the device in. Cold flooded, then heat, then a snap of clarity that made the room painfully sharp. The drip bag sounded like a faucet in Orion's ear, and the overhead lights felt like headlights. Orion flinched, and his pulse jumped. He could hear footsteps outside the curtain like they were in the room. Too bright, Orion rasped. The tech dimmed the lights and slid a soft shield over Orion's eyes. It helped, but Orion still heard the building, the hum of vents, the tick of relays, and the distant slam of a bulkhead. Quaid watched the monitor without blinking. She did not soften the truth. Cost is no sleep and hypersensitivity, Quaid said. If you overload, you can panic. Juno swallowed, throat working around fear. Her eyes stayed on Orion. Is he stable? Quaid pressed 2 fingers to Orion's wrist. She measured him like a machine, not a story. Stable enough to walk, Quaid said. Not stable enough to fight. A crisp chime hit the door, official and impatient. The nurse drone tilted its head like it wished it could pretend it did not hear. The console displayed a line that read, Aegis Marshal Unit requests access to Bay 3 for anomaly safety assessment. Orion felt the words like a hook under his ribs. Aegis was not here to comfort a patient. Orion knew they were here to scan the implant, log it, and take custody. Orion forced his voice to work. The effort hurt. Do not let them touch my neck, Orion said. Quaid's eyes flicked to the door, then back to Orion. Her answer was a command, not comfort. Then you stand up, Quaid said. Right now. Orion swung his legs off the bed and planted his feet. The catalyst held his signal together, but it turned every sound into a blade. The door chime sounded again, closer, like a hand already on a latch. Quaid slapped a strip of sterile tape across the implant line like a quick bandage. Slow breathing, Quaid said. Fast breathing makes you light up. The door opened and 2 Aegis marshals stepped in, visors down and posture calm. One carried a restraint net launcher, and the other held a handheld reader shaped like a checkout scanner. Their lead spoke without warmth. The words were clean and rehearsed. Dr. Morel Quaid. Anomaly Safety Assessment. The trainee remains in custody until cleared. Juno shifted between Orion and the scanner. She did not move her feet. He can barely stand. The marshal did not slow. The reader stayed. Level. Step aside. The reader fan whined, and Orion's skin crawled as if it could feel the scan before it touched him. The urge to bolt surged, and he fought it by locking his eyes on the floor and pulling air in slow measured pulls. Quaid raised her tablet and kept her voice flat. She made it a medical boundary, not an argument. He is post-procedure, Quaid said. You scan that site and you risk a crash. The marshal lifted the reader anyway. Orion moved before fear finished forming, and he stepped aside with controlled speed. He caught the marshal's wrist with his left hand and redirected the reader into the curtain rail. Plastic cracked, and the sharp sound hit Orion like a flash. Move, Orion said. Bryn yanked the side curtain and slapped the staff exit panel. It flashed a lock icon, and the net launcher came up. Quaid snapped one sentence, sharp as a slap. It landed like policy. Fire that in my bay, and you contaminate it. The marshal hesitated just long enough to matter. Orion drove his shoulder into the launcher and forced it off aim. The net burst wide and slapped the wall. Noise spiked. Light fell harsher, and Orion's heartbeat jumped as panic tried to climb. He counted breaths again, in and out, and kept his hands steady. Quaid slapped the staff panel again. Medical emergency egress, Quaid said. The lock clicked, and the door opened into a narrow service hall with pipes and dullwork lights. The air smelled like coolant, and it tasted safer than the bay. Go, Quaid said. If they log you, they own you. Orion did not ask why she cared. He pulled Juno through, shoved Bryn after her, and stepped into the hall as Aegis recovered behind him. A siren rose deeper in the building, clean and sharp. It was not a drill, and it sounded like a hunt. Hours later, back in the service spine, Orion Wren had one job. Get Juno Mallory and Bryn Cato to safe air, grab basic supplies from Dorm Block Charlie, and stay off Aegis Marshal Unit sensors long enough to vanish into maintenance. Aegis was hunting him to tag and take him. Grey Talons was hunting him to catch a bad moment on camera. The service spine was the Academy's back hallway, like the staff corridors behind airport gates. It skipped the public choke points where security liked to wait. Bulkhead doors were closing section by section. Every closed door turned the dome into a funnel. Orion kept his breathing slow and his eyes down. The neural catalyst at his neck made the world too loud, and panic came faster than it used to. He could not let it climb, not with marshals nearby. Orion kept his voice tight and practical. "We go dorm block, Charlie," Orion said. "Water, salts, tape, goggles." Then lower line. Juno stayed close and watched his face. Her voice carried worry without drama. "You good? Keep me moving," Orion said. "Keep me quiet." Bootsteps echoed ahead, steady and professional. Bryn eased to the corner, peeked, then pulled back. "Two marshals. One drone," Bryn said. Orion pressed into a side alcove stacked with hose and filters. He held still while they passed, and the scrape of their boots felt like grit on his teeth. A marshal voice drifted by, flat and certain. It sounded like they were reading a list. Readers catch his pattern. "Funnel him to the arch." The drone whirred as it floated past, nose light sweeping the floor. Orion did not move until they were faded. Then he gave the smallest signal. "Now," Orion said. They slid along the service spine and cut into dorm block Charlie through a staff stairwell. They moved like tired workers cutting through a back hall, because tired workers did not trigger a chase. The dorm smelled like laundry, old coffee, and heat from vending machines. Normal made Orion angry, because normal should not come with hunt sirens. Near the vending machines, the console displayed a line that read, "Anomaly safety active. Stay in room." Bryn snorted once, careful not to push sound. "Rooms do not breathe for you," Bryn said. Orion pointed at a closet labeled rescue practice gear. He kept it short. "Fast hands," Orion said. "No noise." The closet latch was cheap, and Orion tapped the keypad in a quick rhythm. He felt the lock hesitate, then click, and he did not explain. Bryn grabbed 2 water pouches, tape, and a compact light. Juno grabbed electrolyte salts and a basic med kit. Orion took tinted safety goggles and foam earplugs. He shoved the plugs in and slid the goggles on. The hallway softened, but it still hurt, like turning down a siren that never stops. A thin chirp rolled closer anyway. Bryn tilted his head, listening. His mouth barely moved. "Reader ping," Bryn said. "Back stair," Orion answered. They moved controlled, not sprinting. A ceiling panel light flickered once, and the flash punched through Orion's shield. His pulse jumped. Juno grabbed his sleeve and met his eyes. "Look at me," Juno said. "Breathe with me." Orion matched her pace in and out and kept walking like his legs were not shaking. He had supplies now, but he still needed a route that did not run through capture gates. He needed it before the next bulkhead sealed. May was not with them yet, and the building still felt steered. They dropped 2 flights to a lower maintenance junction. A white frame stood at the corner, sensor bars faintly glowing, like an airport checkpoint you walk through without thinking. Orion did not look at it for long. Juno pointed at the frame, uneasy. "What is that?" "The wellness arch," Orion said. "Quick scan gate. It flags my neck fast. We cannot trip it now." Above them, Aegis voices carried down the stairwell. The words were clipped and efficient. "Seal dorm block Charlie. Push to the arch." A thin buzz joined the voices, and Orion felt it in his teeth. A scout drone dropped down the stairwell, nose light sweeping like a flashlight in a dark garage. Bryn's whisper barely moved air. His eyes stayed on the light. "It is coming." Orion saw the play in one glance, and he did not wait for fear to finish forming. If the drone saw them, the arch would chirp, a door would lock, and nets would arrive. "Panel. Now," Orion said. Bryn yanked the service panel wide and shoved Juno inside first. Orion followed, shoulder scraping metal, and the scrape sounded like a scream in his head. Heat surged behind his eyes. He forced his jaw loose and his breathing slow, because he was not allowed to spike here. The drone floated to the corner and paused. Its light painted the arch, then the floor, then the wall where the panel used to sit. Juno's hand found Orion's wrist and squeezed once. The lens angled toward the seam. Orion did not swing, and he did not rush. He leaned forward 1 inch and pressed tape over the seam from inside, flattening it like a quick patch on a leaky hose. The lens light hit dull tape instead of a dark crack. The drone hesitated, then drifted on, bored by boring. When the buzz faded, Orion let out the breath he had been holding. He hated how hard it was to stay still, and he hated that it worked. Bryn pried the panel open, and they crawled through the wall. Orion went last and forced himself not to scrape metal again. A deep rumble rolled through the deck. Somewhere ahead, a bulkhead began to close, slow and unstoppable. "They are cutting sections," Juno whispered. Orion pushed faster, then checked himself. Too much speed meant too much signal, so he slowed half a beat and kept moving. They dropped into a wider service corridor and saw the bulkhead coming down, a thick metal slab inches from the floor. If it shut, they would be trapped on the wrong side of the dome. A side hatch snapped open. A woman in a grease-stained jacket lunged out and slapped an emergency stop. The bulkhead shuddered and froze. Her voice cut through the noise with authority. "Under it," she said. They slid through. The woman leaned into the lever, muscles shaking, and forced the slab up just enough to clear them. When Orion stumbled, she grabbed his harness and hauled him through. Then she let go, and the bulkhead slammed down behind them like a judge closing a door. Her badge read, "May Kestrel, Dome Maintenance Engineer." Her hands were dirty with coolant, and her eyes were steady. May looked at Orion's taped neck and tinted goggles. Her voice was not hostile, just exact. "You are the ping." Juno tensed, shoulders tight. Her question came fast. "Are you Aegis?" May shook her head once. She kept her stance simple. "Maintenance." Orion kept his voice flat. He did not plead. "What do you want?" May answered without drama. Her words sounded like a choice already made. "I want this dome to stop killing people." She shoved a small pouch into Orion's hand. The gear was practical, not fancy. "Better ear filters," May said. "Daka clip shuda." "Put them on." Orion did, and the edge of the world dulled. The relief was not comfort, but it kept panic from climbing. May checked her wrist screen and swore under her breath. Her eyes tracked a map only she could see. "Aegis rerouted bulkheads," May said. "They are herding you into a capture lane." Orion nodded once. His answer was a decision. "Then we do not walk their lane." May pointed down the corridor. Her hand was already moving. "Follow me. Stay off the bright strips. If lights pop, look down and breathe slow." They moved in a tight line through the service spine. Pipes ran overhead, tool carts were chained to walls, and May kept them under ductwork and dead zones. May stopped at a hatch marked hydroponic service. She did not sell it as safety. "Garden on the other side," May said. "It hides you. It also makes a good stage." Bryn frowned, tension sharpening his face. His question landed like a warning. "Stage for who?" May's jaw tightened. She did not look away. Gray talons. Orion felt his stomach drop, and he did not pretend it was nothing. Gray talons did not want him caught. They wanted him scene-breaking. Orion followed May into hydroponics for one reason. The garden had a maintenance exit into the deeper line, and it avoided the scan gate Aegis was using to funnel him. May cracked the hatch. Warm, wet air rolled out, smelling like soil and mint. Rows of green, undergrow lights stretched ahead like a quiet park inside steel. For 2 breaths, it felt safe. Water dripped, and leaves rustled, and those sounds were softer than alarms. Then the lights snapped brighter and began to strobe. A speaker crackled overhead with a warped voice. The lie was simple and loud. "Containment breach. Human unstable." Railings along the walkway began to vibrate, a low hum that climbed into a harsh buzz. Orion felt it in his teeth, and the neural catalyst made it sharper, not softer. Figures moved between plant racks, quick and trained. Gray talons, adult cadets in gray training armor, wrists angled to record. Their leader stepped forward. Senior Cadet Sarenval wore a calm smile locked on like a mask. He tapped his wrist, and a camera drone rose higher. Then he stepped aside just enough to block the exit anyway. Orion kept his hands open. He did not feed the clip. "Move," Orion said. Saren shrugged, almost friendly, and did not move. The hum climbed, Orion's breath sped up, and his pulse jumped hard enough to shake his fingers. The world narrowed at the edges. Juno grabbed his forearm and held his. Gaze. Look at me, Juno said. Breathe with me, okay? Orion forced it, in and out, and he refused to swing. May pointed, voice sharp and clean. Bryn, breaker box. Left wall, May said. Bryn sprinted, and a talon cut across to block him. Bryn feinted and shoved a rolling cart into the cadet's path, and the crash hit Orion like a flash. His stomach lurched and panic surged. A talon lunged at Orion with a restraint strap and a padded baton meant to shove, not kill. Orion reacted before he could think. He caught the wrist, turned, and pinned the attacker into a support post. The move was clean, too clean, and cameras drank it in as the strobe flashed. Orion hated how easy it felt, and he hated that speed felt normal. Bryn, May shouted. Bryn slammed the breaker. The grow lights died, the strobe vanished, and the speaker cut mid-word. The vibrating rails went quiet, leaving wet air and hard breathing. Darkness wrapped the hydroponics, and Orion's panic stopped climbing. He could think again. Saren's voice came from the dark, still amused. Nice, Saren said. We got enough. A drone lifted from behind a plant rack, lens glowing red. It drifted close, trying for a tight shot of Orion's neck. Orion moved, fast but controlled. He grabbed a watering hose, snapped the nozzle up, and blasted the drone's lens. Water sheeted over glass, and the drone wobbled and dropped into leaves. May grabbed Orion's sleeve. Out. Now, May said. They ran along the dark walkway, guided by May's work light, turned low. Behind them, Gray Talon shouted, not in fear, but in excitement. At the service hatch, May slapped the manual release and shoved it open. The corridor beyond was dry and dim, like a tunnel behind a stadium. They spilled out, and May slammed the hatch. Boots hit the other side a second later, and May did not explain. Orion tightened the collar at his throat and forced a slow breath. His body felt hot and thin, like a wire pulled too tight. A siren rose in the distance and moved toward them. Aegis was still hunting, and now the hunt had bait. By the time they reached the water plant annex, Orion Wren had to keep 4 adults alive inside Aster Vale. He had to do it while Aegis hunted the abnormal signal at. His neck and gray talons hunted a clip to ruin him. The next move was simple. Reach the annex, cool him down, and pick a path that did not run through capture gates. The water plant annex sat under Dorm Block Charlie like the service level under a stadium. It had its own air scrubbers and thick walls that muffled the hunt sirens. They needed it now because bulkhead doors were closing in waves. Every closed door turned the dome into a funnel. May shoved the door shut and spun the manual bar into place. Bryn wedged a tool case under the handle for extra bite. Juno pushed a water pouch into Orion's hands. Her voice stayed steady. Small sips, Juno said. Orion drank and forced electrolyte salts down. The neural catalyst kept his hands steady, but did not give him rest. No sleep made every pump click sound like a hammer near his ear. He stared at the floor and counted breaths until the ringing eased. May snapped open a wall panel and plugged in her maintenance tablet. The screen filled with door timings and vent schedules, and her jaw tightened. Then she started ripping the data to a local cache like she was grabbing a fire log before it burned. Bryn leaned in, eyes narrowed. What did you see? Bryn asked. May did not look up. She kept her hands moving. Someone changed my safety routes, May said. She flicked a finger, and a clean line of edits appeared. Doors that should have closed together were staggered, and vents that should have damped alarms were open wide. Light strips that should have dimmed were forced to full bright. Orion pushed himself up on one elbow. So the dome is being steered? Orion asked. May nodded once. Her answer sounded like a verdict. Like a cattle chute. A hard knock at the door, then a second knock, steady and patient. Aegis did not shout, because they did not need to. May closed the panel and killed the screen. She pointed at a grated hatch behind the pumps. Service crawl, May said. It drops into the lab wing trench. Ugly route, less readers. Juno hesitated, fear tugging at her breath. Her question came quiet, but sharp. Why lab wing? Orion kept it short. He did not waste air. because I need a way to make my neck quieter, Orion said. The knock hit again, closer like someone testing the metal. Bryn raised his wrench and looked at May. May pointed down. Her order was a whisper that carried weight. Move. They lifted the grate and crawled into the wet duct. Orion went last to avoid scraping metal, but his shoulder still kissed the edge. The scrape hit his ears like a scream, and heat rose behind his eyes. He did not stop, and he breathed slow as he kept moving. The duct spilled them into a cable trench. The air smelled like disinfectant and warm plastic. A thin electronic beep rolled overhead, steady and cruel, like a store scanner checking every customer. Bryn whispered one word. Reader. May nodded and kept crawling. Her voice stayed low. They want him to run, May said. Orion did not run. He crawled at a controlled pace, because speed was bait and he had already paid for bait once. They reached a ladder and climbed into a dim utility room. May cracked the door and watched the lab hallway. It looked like a hospital corridor after hours. Bright panels, polished floor, and a quiet hum that never stopped. 2 Aegis marshals crossed the far end with a small drone between them. The drone's nose light swept the floor like a flashlight in a dark garage. May waited until they passed, then waved them out. Left wall, May said. Head down. They moved like staff, cutting through the back corridor, hands quiet and shoes soft. May pressed dull tape over a bright panel at the first junction, and the glare softened. Orion held on to that small mercy because his body felt hot and thin. Boots turned the corner behind them, and May yanked a service hatch open. She shoved them into the lower line. The door above clicked shut, and the sound chased them like a threat. Orion's goal for the next leg was simple. Get into Dr. Morel Quade's neural storage, grab the calibration profile for his neck implant, and get out before Aegis flooded the wing with scanners. May wanted it too, because if Orion kept spiking every time lights and alarms hit, he would crash. The dome would keep calling it an accident. The calibration profile was a save setting for the neck device, like a preset on a radio. It could lower Orion's signal and make him harder to track. They had to get it now, because this lab was the only place with a clean copy. The bulkheads were tightening by the minute. May led them up a utility ladder into the lab backside. The lights were wider here, the kind that make your eyes ache even when you are calm. Orion felt the ache-like pressure behind his eyes and kept his shield low. Bryn crouched at the corner and pointed at the ceiling. Small drones were tucked in panel seams, their tiny lenses aimed down the lane. May slapped dull tape over the nearest sensor window and waved them forward. They moved in short bursts between door frames, using the shadows under pipes like cover. Orion kept his eyes on May's boots and forced slow breaths. A drone dropped from a seam with a soft buzz and drifted toward Orion's collar line. Orion froze and panic tried to climb. May stepped between the drone and Orion. She snapped a maintenance tag onto the drone's underside. The drone chirped, accepted the tag, and drifted away like it had been reassigned. May did not smile. Keep moving, May whispered. They reached the door, labeled neural storage. May pressed a maintenance strip over the reader and pulled, and the lock clicked. Inside, cabinet lights snapped on, and Orion flinched. May killed the cabinet lights at the breaker, then snapped the wall screen off with a fuse pull. Darkness helped, but the air still felt sharp. Orion found his card in a labeled drawer and slid it into his pocket. Bryn did not look at the other names. Juno stayed close to Orion, ready to catch him if his knees buckled. Outside, Boots stopped, then a soft chirp hit the door. A net launcher clicked once, patient and close. May pried up the floor panel and dropped the ladder into the cable trench. Her whisper was a knife. Down. They slid into the trench on hands and knees. A strip light snapped on above them, harsh and white. Orion's pulse jumped, heat surged behind his eyes, and the world narrowed. May reached back and gripped his wrist once, hard enough to anchor him. And out, May said. Orion matched her breathing and kept crawling, one knee, one hand, one breath at a time. They climbed into a disinfectant-smelling service room, and May shut the hatch. She shoved a tool case. Against it, the case scraped the floor, and the scrape hit Orion's ears like a shout. A camera in the corner blinked awake, a tiny red dot. The lens pivoted toward Orion as if it recognized him. May stared at it. Her voice went flat. They wanted us in this trench. Orion swallowed. He felt the trap settle. To catch it on camera, Orion said. A thump hit the outer door. A calm voice carried through the metal, as if it belonged here. Orion ran. Open. Bryn raised his wrench. May pushed it down with a quick hand. No noise, May said. A second layer of steps moved outside, lighter and faster. Gray talons were arriving to make the capture loud. A speaker crackled, and a warped voice slid through the door. The bait was not subtle. Show them. May pointed to a maintenance hatch. Her plan stayed physical. Lower line, May said. Storage atrium. Then deep service. They moved, and Orion held the rail and kept his feet under him. No sleep made his legs feel delayed, like his body was a half-beat behind his mind. In the lower line, the air turned colder and the ceiling dropped, forcing them into single file. A reader mast blinked at the far end, its light bar sweeping the lane. May pulled them into a side nook behind a coil rack and held up one finger. The mast chirped once, then twice, tasting the corridor. Orion could feel the urge to move fast, to bolt past it, and he refused. May cracked open a junction box and flicked a switch. The mast light dimmed for 3 breaths, just enough for them to slip by like ghosts. One thought settled in Orion's gut as they cleared the next corner. This was not a hunt reacting to him. This was a hunt built for him. The storage atrium felt like the back of a big box door after closing. Pallets, tool cages, low fans pushing stale air, and narrow lanes between stacked crates waited in dim silence. It was quiet for one breath, then a net launcher fired. The net wrapped Juno around the shoulders and pinned her to a crate. It was built to hold without tearing skin, but it stole her breath and locked her arms. Juno gasped and turned her head. Orion, Juno asked. Orion surged forward, then stopped himself, before he turned the moment into a blur. He could feel the cameras without seeing them, and he knew Gray Talons would cut any speed into a story. 2 Aegis marshals stepped out from behind a pallet stack. A third stayed back with a handheld reader, watching Orion like a cashier watching a suspicious card. The lead marshal kept it short. The choice was not offered. You. Cool me. She walks. May stepped in front of Orion by half a step. Her refusal was clean. No. The marshal lifted the reader a fraction. The fan whine crawled under Orion's skin, and he forced a slow breath without lifting his gaze. A lighter figure stepped into view at the edge of the fans. Senior Cadet Aster Vale stood there with 2 Gray Talons behind him, wrists angled to record. A small drone hovered near Saren's shoulder. Saren did not argue, and he did not plead. He tapped his drone, then nodded toward Orion like he was presenting a prize. Orion felt heat rise behind his eyes, and the catalyst sharpened the fan hum into a saw. His hands wanted to clench. May leaned close enough that Orion could hear her through the noise. Do not give them speed, May said. Orion answered with action, not fury. He dropped the calibration card under a tool cage where no one could grab it fast. Then he stepped to Juno's net and twisted the mesh away from her throat. Bryn got his blade into the weave at the same time. May snapped a bare wire across the net line from an open wall box, and the net went slack. Juno folded forward coughing. The movement punched Orion's nervous system like a siren, and the room turned too bright in his head. Panic surged like a wave, and he lost a slow breath for half a second. Saren's drone drifted closer. Saren's mouth moved in the dim. There, Saren said. Orion heard it as a trap word. His heart kicked harder, and the edges of his vision pulsed. May grabbed his sleeve. Her voice was a metronome. Eyes down, May said. In out. Orion tried and missed the first beat, and that miss felt like falling. The lead marshal raised the net launcher again, not to hurt, to hold. Bryn slammed into the arm and jammed it offline. The launcher barked into a pallet stack, and the net snagged on wood. May shoved Juno toward a maintenance hatch. Her whisper hit like a shove. Go! Juno stumbled, then ran. Bryn moved with her, using his body as a shield. A Gray Talon lunged to block the hatch, batten up. Orion stepped in, caught the baton wrist, and turned the cadet into the wall with a clean pin. He did not hit again, because he did not need to. The fans above kept spinning, the noise kept biting, and Orion could feel his own pulse like a drum in his throat. May yanked the hatch open. Bryn shoved through first, then Juno, then May. Orion went last. A flash popped from Saren's side as a strobe puck hit the floor and fired white bursts. Orion's brain tried to rip itself free, and his implant line burned hot under his collar. He dropped into the tunnel and hit the floor hard. His vision pulsed at the edges, sound turned sharp, and his hands shook. May slammed the hatch shut and drove the bar home. On the other side, Aegis boots hit the metal, steady and patient. Saren's laugh faded, as if it was already turning into a story. May knelt beside Orion and pressed a firm hand to his shoulder. Her voice stayed low and simple. "Stay with me," May said. "You are here." Orion forced air in, then out. The wave eased, but it did not leave. Now the price lived under his skin. His enemies had learned exactly how to trigger it. After that first overload, Orion ran how to stay out of Aegis' hands. He had to keep Gray Talons from capturing a clean panic clip. And he had to get his group onto an exit path, make it open without breaking the dome. He was in a narrow service tunnel, still shaking, and another bulkhead wave was already closing. May crouched beside him with one hand on his shoulder, steady as a vice. Juno and Bryn held the hatch while muffled boots hit metal on the far side. May kept her voice even. "Orion, listen," May said. "You do not win by being fast. You win by being quiet." May pressed a cold water pouch to Orion's neck wrap for a few seconds. The chill did not fix him, but it pulled the heat down enough to think. Bryn cracked open a small supply pouch and handed Orion 2 electrolyte packets. Orion tore them with his teeth and swallowed, then shook his hands out until the tremor eased. "Feet under you?" May asked. "Give me 10 seconds, Orion said. Juno looked past the hatch bar at the shaking metal. Her fear stayed in her throat. "They're going to cut through. Let them," May said. "We are leaving them something to chase." Bryn peeled off his outer jacket and shoved it toward Orion. His plan was quick. "Swap," Bryn said. Orion understood. He slipped his jacket off and Bryn wrapped it around a scrap pipe, right where a corridor reader would pass. May slapped a strip of reflective tape across the collar seam, just enough to make it look like a neckline on a quick scan. Her tone stayed practical. "That buys us a turn," May said. A loud snap hit the hatch. The bar bowed. Orion stood, shoulders loose, and gazed down. He nodded once. "Do it," Orion said. Orion forced air in and out until the ringing eased. He kept his eyes down, because even the tunnel light felt sharp. "Tell me what we do," Orion said. May pointed down the tunnel. Her plan sounded like maintenance, not heroism. "We build a false trail," May said. "We make Aegis chase your signal where we want them." That was the shift, and Orion felt it settle into his bones. He had been running from the trace at his neck, and now he would use it like a flare he could raise and lower. Orion needed one controlled spike and one controlled vanish. May needed to bend doors and lights just enough to save them without damaging the dome. Their target was the deep service spine behind the machine shop, where old insulation and water lines made a dead zone for most casual readers. May led them to a junction box with a red lever and a plane label. It looked like a breaker panel in a warehouse, nothing heroic. It could reroute hallway lights and shut down a sensor lane for a short window. "This is the runway light switch," May said. "It is just hallway guidance like runway dots and gate signs. Aegis follows bright lanes and active readers. We flip it now because the next bulkhead wave will lock this junction away." Orion nodded and kept his breathing slow. He asked the one thing that mattered. "What do you need from me?" May tapped the collar area on his jacket right over the implant line. Her instructions were precise. "You step under one reader for 2 heartbeats," May said. "Then you step back. I cut the lights, and we drop into the dark lane." Bryn frowned. His objection was blunt. "That is bait." "It is controlled bait," May said. "Aegis is already steering him. We steal the steering wheel." Orion checked Juno's face. She looked tired and scared, but she held his gaze. "I could do 2 beats," Orion said. May cracked a side hatch and pointed to a narrow public connector. It was the kind of place people used to cut between dining hall and gym. A white strip light ran down the center like a landing guide. May did not pretend it was safe. Aegis likes that lane, May said. They will be waiting at the far end. Orion pushed his tinted shield up just enough to see the strip light clearly. He took 3 slow steps into the bright. The neural catalyst sharpened everything, and the hum of the strip light sounded like a saw. A ceiling reader chirped, and a thin scam light swept his collar. Orion counted 2 heartbeats and stepped back into shadow. May grabbed his sleeve and pulled him behind the hatch. Down, May said. Breathe. Orion did it, holding air and letting it out. The surge stayed, but did not flood. Far down the hall, boots accelerated. A drone buzzed sharper now, like it had a target. They took the scent, May said. Now we move. They heard it immediately, and it worked exactly once. Aegis' boots went from steady to fast, then faded away in the wrong direction. A net launcher barked somewhere up the bright lane, followed by a sharp call and a hard door slam. Bryn gave a tight smile. They hit the decoy, Bryn said. Orion did not smile back. The sound still stabbed him, and the urge to sprint still lived under his skin. May threw the red lever. Strip lights in the service spine dimmed, and a steady ceiling beep softened into silence. It was not magic, it was maintenance, and it decided which hallway looked safe. They ran, but not like prey. They ran like staff with a destination, heads down and hands. Close. Orion stayed between May and Bryn. At the next junction, May yanked open a floor grate. Warm air rose from below, smelling like oil and wet concrete. Deep line, May said. Once we are in, your signal becomes noise. Orion went first, feet careful on the ladder rungs. The bright lane still felt like heat on his skin. As Juno climbed down, May said one sentence that reset Orion's mind. This is not just about you anymore, May said. This is about stopping them from owning the dome. A heavy door slammed above, and the lock sound was final. Orion needed to break Grey Talon's story before it became the only story. May needed proof that the traps were built on purpose. The plan was simple and physical. Push a clean packet out through the Academy emergency uplink. Then move before anyone could stop them. The emergency uplink was a hardwired call box, like a fire alarm panel that calls inspectors outside the building. It used a separate line that campus security could not fully mute. They had to use it now because the uplink only opened in short windows during pressure balancing. May guided them through the deep spine to a small room marked air balancer. Fans roared overhead, but the roar was steady and easier on Orion than sharp beeps and strobe. May ripped 3 short clips from her tablet without giving a speech. Timestamps, power poles, and audio distortion mapped to specific corridors. She clipped the files to a single packet and compressed it hard. Bryn watched the door. He kept his voice low. How long? Bryn asked. May pointed at the uplink light as it blinked slow, then faster. Her answer was a clock. 1 window, May said. We send, then we run. Juno steadied Orion by the elbow. Orion felt the dull heat behind his eyes, a warning that he was still close to the edge. May plugged the cable into the uplink box. The amber light shifted to a fast blink, and the window was open. A speaker in the corridor popped to life. One calm sentence slid out, smooth as a school announcement. May Kestrel. Step away from the panel. May froze for half a breath. Her whisper came out like a name you do not say lightly. Provost Calder Vossen. Orion moved to the door and pressed his ear to the metal. He heard boots, heavy and even, and it sounded like Aegis pace. May did not argue with the speaker. She hit send. The uplink box chimed once, and the amber light went solid. May exhaled one tight breath. It is out, May said. Bryn did not celebrate. He shoved a tool case against the door and braced it with his shoulder as the first impact hit. May looked at Orion and delivered a reset that mattered. Her words were simple. Now Grey Talons cannot win with edits, May said, so they will try to win with force. A crash hit the outer door. The tool case skittered as the hinges screamed. Bryn kicked a second case into place and leaned in with his shoulder. May snapped the room lights off and pulled a small vent handle. A cold draft rushed through, loud enough to smear footstep sounds for a moment. May kept it clean. Go on 3, May said. 1, 2, 3. They burst through the side service hatch into the deep spine. Aegis hit the air room door at the same time, and metal shrieked behind them. Orion kept his pace even. Every instinct begged for speed, and he treated that instinct like a trap. May ripped the cable out and pointed down the corridor. Her route was already chosen. Jet Bridge Hall, May said. Fast walk, no sprint. They moved, and Orion's ears hated the corridor immediately. The connector was tight, like the jet bridge between plane and terminal, with handrails on both sides and a ceiling low enough to trap sound. Every foot scuff echoed back at him. May stepped out first and held her work light low. Bryn followed, then Juno, then Orion, shoulders loose and eyes down. At the far end, shadows shifted. Senior Cadet Aster Vale stepped into the center lane with 2 gray talons beside him. Another pair hung back near the junction, spaced a trap. A camera drone hovered near Saren's shoulder like a pet. Saren flicked his fingers, and the corridor lights snapped to full bright. A speaker box on the wall screamed a high, sharp tone. Orion felt it behind his eyes, and his breath hitched. Heat surged, and his hand shook. May did not yell. She moved. She slapped the runway light switch panel on the wall and yanked a cover. Bryn was already there, wrench up. He smashed the speaker feed box, not to destroy the dome, just to silence the tone. Sparks spat, and the scream cut off, leaving only the hum of lights. One gray talon lunged at Bryn with a padded baton. Bryn pivoted and drove the attacker into the rail, hard enough to stop, not to end. Juno grabbed May's sleeve. Orion is fading, Juno said. Orion forced his feet forward and kept his hands open. He could win a brawl, but he could not win the cost if he let speed take over. Saren stepped closer, drone tracking. He raised his palms like a coach, inviting a mistake. Orion did not take the bait. He moved like rescue training, not rage. He stepped to the side, trapped Saren's wrist against the rail with his forearm, and used Saren's balance to turn him into the wall. Saren grunted, and the drone caught the move. A gray talon behind, Orion slapped a strobe puck to the floor. White flashes fired fast, and Orion's brain tried to rip itself free. May barked one word. Her command cut through everything. Down, May said. Orion dropped his gaze and counted breaths, but flashes still hit through his eyelids. His heart raced. His throat felt too tight to swallow, and the edge of panic rose again. Bryn tackled the cadet with the strobe puck and pinned him. He ripped the puck up and shoved it into a tool bag, then zipped it shut. The flashes died. Orion swayed, and the corridor tilted, and his body finally said no. May caught him before he hit the floor. She hooked his arm over her shoulder and dragged, using the handrail for leverage. Saren wiped his mouth and smiled again, thin and mean. His voice carried like a microphone. You cannot carry him, Saren said. May kicked aside hatch-marked dark lane access. It popped open into a maintenance corridor with no overhead lights, used to avoid glare on reflective pipes. Darkness spilled out like water. May shoved Bryn and Juno inside first. Bryn grabbed Orion's other arm, and together they hauled him into the dark lane where echoes softened and the light stopped stabbing. Saren did not follow into the black. He stood at the bright corridor edge, breathing hard, watching. May slammed the hatch and threw the manual bar. The click was small, but it sounded like a promise. In the dark lane, Orion's breathing slowed. The overload wave eased to a dull roar. May leaned close, voice low and practical. You just proved you can choose control, May said. Now we get you out before Aegis solves this with a net. Orion managed one rough whisper. He needed confirmation, not comfort. Did the uplink go? Orion asked. May nodded. Her answer was the only thing that mattered. It went, May said. Orion closed his eyes for one beat. Not sleep, just a moment without light. When he opened them again, the darkness felt like cover, not fear. They moved deeper into the service maze. Orion knew the next fight would not be about a hallway. It would be about the heart of the dome. By the time they reached the control spine access, Orion Wren had one remaining task. get his group out of Aster Vale before Aegis boxed them in, and before Grey Talons forced one last panic moment on camera. May knew the only route still moving. The control spine was the dome's central service hall, where locks and vents answered a single panel. If they reached it first, they could open the only remaining way to the outside service dock. If Aegis reached it first, every door would obey them. The control spine was the building's master hallway, like the control room behind an airport terminal. It could open the evac lane to the outside dock. They had to take it now, because once Aegis held the spine, the dome would become a cage. May led them up a dim service stair and cracked the access door. The corridor beyond was wide and clean, with low marker lights like runway dots. Orion kept his eyes down, and the noise in his head was quieter. "Walk," May said. "Stay off the center strip." Bryn stayed behind with his wrench tucked tight. Juno kept a hand on Orion's elbow and matched his pace. A ceiling speaker clicked once. One sentence slid out, calm and close. "Stop where you are." May did not answer. She kept moving. 3 Aegis marshals stepped into the lane, shoulder to shoulder, nets held low. Another pair slid in behind them, cutting off retreat without a shout. Dr. Morel Quaid was with them, hard case in hand, eyes on Orion's collar like it was a barcode. Orion did not negotiate. He pointed once. His order was quiet. "Bryn, left," Orion said. Bryn moved first. He threw his wrench like a bowling ball into the left marshal's launcher hinge. Metal popped, and the launcher sagged. Orion stepped sideways at the same time, fast enough to clear the center and slow enough to keep his pulse from spiking. A net fired and snapped through empty air. The second net fired low and tried to wrap Orion's legs. Orion planted a boot on the handrail base, lifted, and let the mesh slide under him. He kicked it away with the edge of his shoe. May was already at a wall box. She tore the cover off and slapped the runway marker switch down. Half the corridor lights dimmed. The steady ceiling beeps softened, and for Orion it felt like someone turned the volume down on the world again. Quaid snapped her case open and stepped forward. She reached for Orion's collar with a compact reader and a clamp tool, trying to tag and grab in one motion. May hit Quaid's forearm with her tool bag. The clamp bounced off the rail and skittered away. Quaid pivoted, quick and practiced, and tried again from a new angle. Juno shoved May back a half step and took the next hit on her shoulder. Juno grunted and stayed upright. Her voice did not shake. "Go," Juno said. Orion did not leave her. He stepped in, trapped Quaid's wrist against the rail with his forearm, and pushed just enough to stop the grab without breaking bones. Quaid's calm did not crack. Her free hand went for a pocket case, and Orion saw the needle cap flash in the dim. Bryn slammed into the nearest marshal and drove him into the wall. The second marshal raised a launcher again, but May pulled a cable loop from the open wall box. She whipped it around the launcher's barrel, then yanked. The launcher jammed against its own line. Above, a soft buzz rose. Saren Val's drone dropped from the catwalk edge and hovered, lens hungry. A strobe puck snapped onto the rail above, and white flashes began to fire. Orion felt the flashes bite through his eyelids, and panic tried to climb. He kept his gaze on the floor and counted breaths. In, out, in, out. He moved on the exhale. May pointed down the corridor. "Operations room." "Now," May said. They pushed through a gap Bryn made with his shoulder. Aegis boots regrouped behind them, steady and patient, and the strobe kept firing above like cheap lightning. They reached the reinforced door marked Control Spine Operations. May slapped her palm to the reader. Denial flashed. A second denial followed, faster. May pulled a short maintenance key from her pocket. Her hand shook once, then steadied, and she jammed the key into the manual slot. She turned hard. The lock clicked, and the door popped. Inside, May said, the operations room looked like a small power station, screens, switches, and a corridor map on the wall. Fans hummed steady, and Orion held on to that steadiness like a rope. May pulled up the map and traced a thin green line with her finger. Her plan came out in short phrases. "I side dock," May said. "Last gate reads your collar up close." Bryn braced the door with his shoulder while May worked. Juno watched the hallway camera feed on a small side screen. Orion kept his hands open and his breathing slow. A crash hit the outer door, The handle shook. A net launcher barked once outside, then silence again, the kind that meant Aegis was setting up for a clean entry. May moved without giving a lecture. She slapped a physical cover over the main panel camera. Then she yanked a breaker that cut the room lights down to low markers. Juno pointed at the feed. Her voice stayed tight. "They're stacking outside." Orion pulled the calibration card from his pocket. His fingers shook from fatigue, but he kept them steady. "I can tune down again," Orion said. "I pass like a normal worker." May hesitated for one breath, then nodded. Her answer carried limits. "It lowers you," May said. "It does not erase you." Orion held her gaze. His choice was simple. "Lower is enough," Orion said. May took a small field connector and pressed it to the port line under Orion's collar. She followed the steps on her tablet, calm and fast, eyes flicking between numbers in Orion's face. Soft clicks sounded under Orion's collar. The fan hum stopped stabbing, and the bright edge of the world dulled. Then his reflexes felt heavier, like moving with a wet coat on. May pulled back. "Done," May said. Another crash hit the door. Bryn's shoulder slid half an inch. Juno tightened her grip on a handrail and set her feet. May hit the open command. The green line on the map brightened, and a small timer started on the screen. It began to count down. "Lane is live," May said. "Move." Orion grabbed May's wrist. His words came out like a hook. "You come," Orion said. May froze. Her fear was not for herself. "If I leave, I am the one who opened it," May said. Orion did not argue. He pulled her toward the side hatch, and that was the answer. Bryn kicked the side hatch open. Cold air spilled in, sharp and clean, and the lane lights glowed low green beyond. Aegis hit the outer door hard enough to rattle the panel. May shoved a tool case against it as they moved. Juno went first. Bryn followed, then May. Orion went last, and he did not look back. The evac lane felt like a jet bridge, narrow and metal, lit by low green markers. Cold air seeped through seams, and the floor vibrated with distant pumps. May kept the rules simple. "Stay in the green," May said. "Do not step off." A side hatch ahead clicked open. 2 Aegis marshals stepped into the lane, nets up, placed there to wait for the only door that still worked. Bryn swung his wrench into the nearest launcher and knocked it aside. The second marshal fired, and the net spread wide. Orion stepped in and guided the net away from Juno with his forearm. The mesh clipped his shoulder and tightened, tugging him back. His dulled reflexes felt the delay, and panic tried to climb. Orion forced one breath in and one breath out. The overload did not surge. The tune held. He used the handrail as leverage, rolled his shoulder, and slipped the line off enough to get free. Bryn shoved the marshal into the wall, and Juno kicked the canister away, sending it skittering down the lane. May slammed the manual close on the side hatch. The door locked with a heavy thunk. "That is all I can do," May said. They moved again, controlled and fast. Ahead, the last gate waited, a narrow frame with a soft scan light. May pointed at it. Her voice stayed steady. "Walk," May said. "Do not run." They walked. Orion could feel his heart thud in his throat, and he kept. His gaze down. The gate light swept his collar and moved on. No chirp, no seal. They passed. The dock door opened and outside air hit hard, cold, sharp, real. Beyond the pad, the ice valley stretched under a dark sky and the dome shadow. A small maintenance shuttle sat on the pad, dull gray, ramp half down. The pilot waved, eyes wide, not asking questions. The words came out like an order. "Get in," the pilot shouted. They climbed aboard. Orion turned back once and saw the evac lane door beginning to close, slow and heavy. On an upper catwalk inside the airlock edge, Sarenval appeared again, breath steaming. His drone hovered, trying to catch one last angle through the narrowing gap. May lifted her work light and snapped it on, aimed straight at the drone. The glare washed the lens and turned the last shot into white. The evac lane door sealed with a final thud. It cut off Aegis and gray talons on the other side. May dropped the light and exhaled. Her voice sounded like someone choosing the dome over pride. "Let close," May said. "If it stays open, the dome bleeds." The shuttle lifted and drifted out over ice ridges and dark service towers. Aster Vale shrank behind them like a lit stadium under winter weather. Juno slumped into a seat and finally cried without sound. Bryn wiped his mouth and stared at the floor, hands still shaking from adrenaline. May sat on the deck with her back to the bulkhead, breathing hard. Her hands trembled now that she could afford it. Orion sat across from her. He felt quieter and slower, but he was still here. "You sent the uplink," Orion said. May nodded. Her answer carried consequences. "It is outside now," May said. Orion looked out at the dome. The truth was not comforting. "They will call us a problem," Orion said. May met his eyes. Her voice did not ask permission. "Then let them," May said. Orion touched the collar at his throat and felt the cost waiting. Sleepless nights, too much light, too much noise, and one bad spike away from losing himself. He did not look away from it. May shifted closer until her shoulder touched his. It was not romance talk. It was a decision made in motion. "We did not get a clean ending," May said. Orion answered without a smile. His voice carried relief and warning. "We got a real one," Orion said. The shuttle aimed for a small beacon ahead, steady lights in the dark. Behind them, inside the dome, powerful people would scramble to edit the story. Outside the dome, the evidence was already traveling. Orion took one slow breath, held it, then let it go. For the first time since training Habitat 1, he could hear the engine hum without it turning into a weapon. Out on the ice, the dome behind them was still lit, still busy, still pretending nothing happened. Inside it, people with clean hands would try to edit logs, trim footage, and turn a hunt into a safety drill. But the evidence was already moving. Orion Wren sat on the shuttle floor with his back to the bulkhead and kept his breathing slow. The neural catalyst did not make him a superhero. It made him sharper, and then it demanded a price. No sleep, too much light, too much noise, and one bad spike away from losing himself. May Kestrel sat beside him, grease on her hands, a target on her name, and no regret in her eyes. She did not save him with speeches. She saved him with switches, doors, and the kind of courage that looks ordinary until you realize what it costs. Juno and Bryn did not cheer. They just kept breathing. That was the win. Because in a galaxy that tries to turn people into property, the most dangerous thing a human can do is stay human. Keep control, make a choice, refuse to be owned. And somewhere behind the dome glass, the people who built the trap finally had to face a new problem. The truth does not stay locked forever. If you want more grounded sci-fi like this, hit the like button. Share it with someone who loves tense survival stories. And subscribe to the channel, because Orion and May are not just running from a dome anymore. They are running straight into the system that built it.